Good morning, everyone. Still morning. We are now on to the second part of our final day of Africa Summit. Again, Cheryl, thank you so much for a fantastic keynote. We will continue, in fact, in some of the themes that we've been talking about. Well, actually, through the whole week, and that Cheryl has really emphasized in her talk today. So for the next hour and a half, we are going to have a kind of open panel discussion about vibrant and inclusive communities in the context of Africa, but also in the global context. Before we start, I would like to, first of all, thank our panelists for joining us today. And we have Jess, Cheryl, Nana, and also Janet joining us online. And can we just spend the next couple of minutes just kind of doing the introductions? Nana, I'll start with you. A couple of words about yourself and how does your role relate to vibrant and inclusive communities?
Cool. I wish I went second, so I can.
Oh, sorry.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm Nana Badu. I am the founder and CEO of Badu organization. So we're essentially an ecosystem catalyzing systematic change through dynamic community inclusion. And most people think, what does that mean? And the reason why we're quite intentional about our language is because we feel that if you want to call systematic change, you have to look at a different metric. So we look at sports and physical activity to look at that mental well aspect of people being able and feeling able to kind of take their own action. Then we look at community and placemaking, which is almost the glue. Like, how do you constantly evolve from those spaces? When you create a space in that way, you're almost preparing for when they win, rather than trying to administer some sort of medicine. And then the third thing for our pillar is essentially workforce education and mentorship. So what's the guidance for when they win? How do we build from that learning aspect as well, but also ourselves? So that's what we do. We do as an organisation in the UK, and also currently for the last 2.5 years, we do work in Africa as well. So I'm from Ghana, so quite biased to that culture. But it's also understanding that the challenges that we have there as well as a community. So we're doing the same aspect of per week, 800 children get similar services from what we do here in the UK. And then we also then make sure that, like, building a workforce that understand the next movement of how we can do things differently. And so that's that, and then there's other stuff as well, but I'm going to stop here.
Which I'm sure will come. So thanks so much, Nana. Cheryl, I think it's worth reintroducing yourself for the sake of new people joining online in the room as well.
Okay, I'm Cheryl Potgieter. I'm a visiting fellow here at Loughborough for 2024. That's it.
Forever.
I'm from South Africa, as you might have heard, because I just did the keynote. I have a doctorate in psychology and I'm a professor in psychology. And I currently head the Gender Justice, Health and Human Development Division at Durban University of Technology. I also head the Research and Doctoral Leadership Academy, which is to support emerging academics into becoming full professors. And we focus not only, but a key focus is on women academics, and specifically Black women academics. I feel that I've got a little bit of a history with Loughborough, even though it's like 3 or 4 years, because I've met Jess a few years ago. Because as I'm fortunate, I think it's fortunate to sit on the board of Loughborough University in terms of issues and advising on issues with the team on transformation. I've worked globally. I've been a dean and I've been a deputy vice chancellor. And at this stage, I really am happy to be working with communities and as a scholar.
Super. Thanks so much, Cheryl. Jess, please.
I'm Jessica. I'm at Loughborough University in London. Always nice to come to the Midlands campus. I research in the area of communication and social change. And I think I'm on this panel partly because of some of my research collaborations over the past 10 years, which has been with the University of Malawi and with several local NGOs, civil society organizations in Malawi. 2 current projects. One is around parasport and trying to use the opportunity of parasport to catalyze different kinds of conversations about disability. And the other one started from trying to ask, what are communication organizations, communication NGOs actually doing compared with what we say is like the right way, or the kind of ways of doing participatory communication. What are they actually doing and why? And tugging on that kind of thread has I found myself looking very much at the politics of development funding. So that's kind of the second strand of the work that probably my current obsession.
Thank you, Jess. Thanks for joining us today. And finally, Janet, unfortunately not in person, but thanks online.
Thank you so much. It's nice meeting all of you. So let me start from the known. I'm excited to be part of this conversation. I'm Janet Adeyemi. So I will mention my maiden name, Ni Adepoju, because I came to Loughborough University as a young girl some 41 years ago to do my master's in Loughborough University. So it's quite exciting connecting back to this institution, which we used, in those days, we say the best engineering school in UK. So I'm so proud of being a Loughborough alumni. I have a very broad-based educational background. I started out as a geologist and ended up as a politician, an activist, everything together as an engineer. And why? Because of just what we are discussing today, searching for inclusivity. Because in those days, as a geologist, when you graduate, women are not allowed to work in the oil and gas sector. Women are not allowed to work on the fields. There are so many restrictions. And I said, let me go and study engineering and see if it will be better. I came to Loughborough to study engineering. And I find out that it has always been exclusion, exclusion, and exclusion. So I went into politics to say, I'm going to fight and make sure I get things done. But again, you get to politics, you find out that you are just a lone voice in what you call the boys' club. So going further became a limitation, and that was what took me to activism. So naturally, I started Women in Mining. Women in Mining, I started in 2006, and it was like a lone voice. Because for those of you who know Nigeria, you will know Nigeria has migrated completely and forgotten about mining and focused on the quick win, which is oil and gas. So, but because I was in parliament then, I saw that if I did not rise up now and start this organization, immediately I left parliament, since I knew the bill was on. Again, the gap will continue and we keep crying, we are marginalized. So we started, and I give God all the glory in the sense that if you look back today, you find out that more women have been replicated in that sector. So I'm deeply committed to preserving the cultural heritage and safeguarding community identity, particularly in rapidly changing environments where women, children, disabled, everybody's integrated, because the SDG law says none should be left behind. And truly, I believe that none should be left behind in anything we do. And so my broad-based educational background that spans through law, PhD in mineral economics and things like that, I like studying. So I keep studying and I keep engaging. So, and I'm happy today to equally learn, because I listened to Prof. In her keynote presentation was fantastic. And I think coming here today, again, we open up opportunities, for exchange of ideas and all that. So I want to seize this opportunity to say, thank you for creating this window of opportunity to still be part of this event. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. I just want to remind everyone that whilst I'm going to pose a couple of questions, this is just to kind of warm us up. The floor is open to all of you for comments, questions, ideas, whatever you want. We are here to kind of engage. I'm going to start with a really easy question to our panelists. We've been using this phrase, vibrant and inclusive communities, throughout this week, because this is a kind of core theme at Loughborough, right? This is how we branded, if you wish, one of the strategic themes. But for you, what would a successful or truly vibrant and inclusive community actually look like? What does it mean for you personally in your roles, in your context? How do you see a vibrant and inclusive community? Who wants to start?
You can look at me again.
Sorry, you're like, yeah. Do you want to start, or anyone else?
Yeah, you want me to start?
Oh, yes.
All right. Janet, you're
Yeah, well, when you talk about a vibrant, inclusive community, I will look at it from the point of mining. If you look at mining itself, it has always been, from the very beginning, women are stereotyped, excluded, because they see it as a macho job. They see it as a job meant for the guys. So irrespective of what you do, women are, when you tell somebody, oh, you want to mine, or you're a geologist, or you're a geophysicist, people, what are you doing there? What do you do? And when you tell people you're in the mining space, the first question that comes is, why? What are you doing? And unconsciously, even policymakers who sit at the table to take decisions, because again, at the table, women are not there. Women, and where they are there, some of them are so timid, you understand, that they hardly speak, you understand, to represent the interest of women. You find out that that inclusion is not there. So when you talk about a system in the mining sector, which I want to see inclusivity in all directions. And that means it has to be reflected in the law. As it is today, we are in the process of trying, after quite a number of years of advocacy, of ensuring that the laws, you understand, becomes more gender friendly, because as of now, the law is opaque. That is completely not reflective of gender interest. You find professionals who graduate and are discriminated against. In time past, it's a little bit getting better. The light, we are beginning to see a little bit of the rays, you understand, but not yet the intensity of the light. So you need a situation where people can decide for themselves. Don't cry more than the bereaved, you understand? Let people decide for themselves what they want to do. That is what you want to see. You want a place where, when you talk about a mining community, the people themselves, because women are the most vulnerable too, you find out that when mining companies come to communities to want to seek consent or discuss about community agreement, women again are not at the table. You find people taking decisions on their behalf. These are things that must not be. And so this can be corrected through legislations, which is very important. Then number two, you want to see the economic impact, the social impact, the environment, when you are degrading an environment, because now you want to look at traditional methods versus modern methods, because those are disruptions that are coming. Oh, you are bringing something for the good of the community, yes, but how good and how impactful? Have you done the analysis to see how these things impact the people you are bringing the good for? So they must be at the table to be able to dialogue with you. So when you look at all these critical components, you find out that it is very important for you to look at the social benefits of the people. How are they going to be engaged? Are jobs going to be created? Are jobs going to be disrupted? So I want to see a place where everybody, you understand, is part of any benefits that is coming from mining. Mining can be very destructive and can equally be very good. So the two sides of the coin must be evaluated vis-a-vis the position of women and children in any community. And that's what you call inclusion. That is what you call, and then in doing that, you equally want to preserve their culture, because if you are not careful, you over-dilute the place. I tell you now that when you get to some communities, and I don't want to, I'm not being biased against the Chinese, but when you get to some very rural communities in Nigeria now, you find Chinese, you understand? You find children with Chinese identity, no parents, nothing, you understand? And gradually they are losing, you understand, the fabric, the cohesion of the community. The community is being disrupted because they give these people who have little or no knowledge, maybe some miserable dollars, and the community leaders just get involved with them. So these are things you want to straighten up, and you can straighten them out through legislation. You can straighten them out, by looking at legal frameworks. You can straighten them out by looking at the social benefits and other things like that. So to me, it is very, very important we lay this down as a foundation. You understand, when you are talking about as it affects me in the mining, as a leader of the women in mining in Nigeria. Those are the things I want to see. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So that's so important, because I think I approach this so a little bit of like background in terms of like I was like very rebel mindset around like inclusivity on my community, how systems were created in a way that still reduced my dream deficit in terms of what I felt I could be. And so when we approach it as an organization, we think about Africa in this context, is bridging that gap with a dream deficit for our communities and all children to almost feel, particularly Black girls actually, to almost start to be able to dream from as little as 8 of what it can be based on what they already have. So it's not what I need to do to get approval or liked or so on. It's all based around what you already are what you've got around you and then building off of that aspect. So I think when I talk about that, I think it seeps and goes back into seeping into culture when we're talking about this and how we look at it as an organization, is that for any change to take place, you have to come to the table knowing what you like, you have to have something to bargain with. And too often Africa turns up, and I say Africa, I don't want to try and say Africa like it's a one country, it's a continent, it's giant. And even I was talking this morning with my colleagues who are over there, by the way, around just even with that one, like I can use Ghana. I recently just came back from Nigeria a week ago as well. But there are large tribes within that. It's not even like a small, like every single one has its own being. So when we talk about that being inclusive and looking at like changing cultures, I feel like it's important that we look at it from a dream deficit aspect. But for any change to happen, do the people that are going to feel that change, be part of that change, feel empowered and feel capable that they got something to bring to the table. And how does that start? I think that's the first point, because other than that, even as an African, as a Black man as well, always being constant that I'm not behaving like a savior, because you can still remove power from people by thinking you're the only one who can do something for them. So I'm quite conscious, and when I speak in a way of like being so mindful that you're trying to home in on power that exists. And then what does that mean for the dream deficit, like to improve the dream deficit for communities, particularly young people?
Thank you, Nana. And we will definitely come back to culture and power, I think, as some of the topics that we really kind of unpack with further. Cheryl, Jess, and your thoughts on what is your dream vibrant and inclusive community? What would it look like for you?
Well, I think some of you heard what is my dream vibrant community was my keynote. So I have a dream that hopefully in the next few years, we won't have the draconian laws that we have on the African continent in terms of the LGBTQI plus community. I also have a dream that women will be included in all spaces at senior levels, junior levels, but that the emerging next generation of women would have the opportunities that we don't have. And I'm very, as my fellow panelist has said, I'm very aware of the fact that Africa is a continent and not a country. And as we have been saying over the last few days, even within a country, there are many countries within Africa, depending if your language, your religion, your class background. So one needs to be cognizant of that. I haven't spoken about it in the few days that I've been here, but I think one needs to, I haven't been saying it very clearly. For me, the intersectionality of marginalized groupings and the consequences of being marginalized, one needs to understand that if you marginalize, it's race issues, it's gender issues, it's age issues, it's the issue of disability. So it's interesting, the word disabilities hasn't come up very often in the few days that we are here, marginalized groupings and the impact on women and people that that are disabled. So for me, I have a vision that an inclusive society would be one where everybody has access to the same opportunities and resources, and also that we will no longer be in a space where they would say, oh, she's the first woman in engineering, or she's the first Black woman with a disability in engineering, that those challenges that we currently have would be normative.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to pick up on the vibrant part of the phrase thing. And pick up also on something that Cheryl said in her keynote around civil society that feels like it's dwindled. It reminds me of some of the discussions around NGOization. So the transition or the process of civil society responding to certain kind of funding regimes and becoming kind of compliant within the funding system, so managerially compliant to be able to receive the funding and the effect that has on their political voice and their role as civil society. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the critique of NGOization, which I think makes it sound like the organizations are the problem, but actually the funding regime is the problem. And I think there's moves on under the umbrella idea of localization, which is both a bottom-up demand for localization, but also, you know, our government is working on a localization strategy as well, so it's happening at both ends. But yeah, I think that the center of that kind of idea of localization should be around the vibrancy, strength of civil society regaining the power, regaining the seat at the table. And some of the organizations I'm working with are trying to work on social enterprise as being able to be in a position where they can say no to some things, like just that ability to say, no, I don't want to partner with you on that. Which at the moment because of the precarious situation they're in, they often feel like they're not in that position. So yeah, I think I would like to see strong civil society for a starting point for thinking about vibrant, inclusive communities.
Thanks so much. I'd like to open to the floor. Are there any comments, questions, thoughts online or in the audience?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed all of the discussion this morning. It's really nice to hear all of these points, and a couple of people touched on it. It would be nice to hear a bit more about the demographic dividend in Africa. There's such a vibrant young population who are often marginalised from power and discussions and thoughts that you have on that. I think particularly where it comes in with intersectionality and working in informal settlements and the difficulties that you face in finding a path to being part of a vibrant city or a vibrant community. I just want to give one example from a project that we were working on where it was an engagement project working with youth groups to try and help to support them to think about ways that they could create opportunities for food in the urban environment. And the youth groups came up with some really innovative ideas about gardening using recycled materials to form the plant pots and reclaiming land that was not land that you would have gardened on previously. In fact, so innovative that when King Charles went to visit, he visited the project and was really impressed with it and has kept in contact since. But then this year, you may recall that there were floods in Eastern Africa, and they hit the media, and the governments were put under pressure for not responding to the floods. And one of the responses to the floods was that people were dying, and so in order to create this vibrant, inclusive community, we need to make sure that people won't die. So the reaction was this informal settlement where this youth group had been working was an informal settlement. It was right by the river was rising, so the reaction was to clear the informal settlement, as often happens. But interestingly, the settlement was cleared, but not the gardening project, because the youth group had created such a vibe with the project and such a presence with the project that when they went into clear, the local authorities didn't want the gardening project cleared because they knew politically that it had been a big project and it created headlines. So I guess it gave that voice, but they lost their homes, they lost everything in the clearance. They kept their project, but it's how do we create vibrant and inclusive communities, but at the same time grapple with all of these complexities that they do come with the intersectionality. So I'd be interested in the panel's opinions.
Let me get this passing it on some. We'll come to you. No, I'm gonna actually, because of the discussion we just had over the
Yeah.
coffee break, right, and engaging younger people, so this is something that you've raised first. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think culture is like, I'm fortunate to be born and I say fortunate to be born in Ghana, growing up in both the city and the villages and having two different cultures. So the Ewa tribe and the Kogi tribe don't necessarily get on. And even marriage becomes a quiet thing. So I'm fortunate to learn from those things. And I think when I think about when we're doing around young people or anything we're trying to do, it's respecting that knowledge first. Understanding that it's been their existence and survival to get us to a platform that we can now dream bigger. So what we do in Ghana, for instance, and when we decided to do some work and so on, it was to reach out to the kin, not to politicians, the local chief or whoever is on the ground, then to the parents, and then to the children. And I think that's how you start, like with that, because your pain is culturally to pay respect to those that come, whether you think they've done it right or wrong, or they're good or bad, or they don't know this, or regardless, we are here because of them. So I think that's what when we think about vibrant inclusive, and then by doing that as well, the young people understand this. I think we were talking about Sankofa about before you can move forward, and you will move forward, take that knowledge, like understand that, because that's the thing that governs you, away from policies, away from Bibles, away from all the other stuff. The culture is seeped in the land and how you move. And I think that's where at the organization we always think about how are we empowering, but also how we're not disrespecting what has gone before as well, and not being judged like I'm not God. Like, it's just all of us understanding that we all from a different platform. Someone will judge what I'm doing at the moment, that's wrong, and they'll have their opinion. And either way, so once again, so I think that's how you do it. And then from there, I think the next biggest thing was that then, because we've seek permission in that aspect to test it, we're not seeking permission on how to do it, we're seeking permission to try something. And then from there, what you then try for us in terms of vibrancy is then the young people govern what then happens next. So one key thing about our development centers in Africa, in Ghana, sorry, is that the young people pay to come and take part in activities by collecting any of those plastic water bottles or drinks or thingy to come down to the centers. We did that intentionally because once again, they have earned the right to be there. I'm not doing them a favor. They might not have the money, but they're bringing some sort of standards. We are honored to work with you. And I think that is when we talk about the dream deficit and also power and also empowering, you have to be intentional about what support you're coming to do. Why are you here? And are you coming to save, or are you making it's because there's value in it for me as well. I sit here because of them. Like I recognize our work because of them as well. So I think that's where I would say if you're trying to be vibrant and inclusive and understanding aspects, it's also making sure that at each point there's a balance in power and there's a balance in exchange. So they know they pay for their services that they get from us. They're not a charity case.
Thank you. Anyone else on the panel would like to respond?
I maybe want to. I don't have the answer, but the example that you gave, I don't have an absolute answer. The example that you gave in terms that people were removed from the area that was affected by, let me call it, climate change, and the project stayed. I think it's always the challenge of balancing the issues of development with the humane or the human, and one needs to engage with all parties involved, stakeholders. I mean, I think it's a valid point that he made. When you come into a community, you might not want to engage with the local chief, but you need, those are the gatekeepers, and you need to you need to make that engagement because it's out of for various reasons. When I was part of the National Road Agency, there's an area in South Africa called the Wild Coast, and it's one of the poorest areas in South Africa. It's the rural Eastern Cape, and we needed to build a road. But if we built a road, it would impact on women and men and poor communities, their everyday let's say the everyday little shops and entrepreneurial activities. So it would be good for them for us to build the road with going through, because then the transport and whoever comes through would be able to buy their produce, the locally produced produce. But then there was protests in the area from more middle-class people and environmentalists, the green people, like the communities call them, to say, we don't want this road because it's going to impact on the environment. And that was something that one had to really engage and negotiate. And it's a global issue, but there are no easy answers. And it's only in the specific area that you're going to be able to get the answer, because you need to read the local conditions.
Thanks, Cheryl. Jessica.
Yes, sorry, it's not a direct answer, but it's more bouncing off what we've just talked about. So, and particularly on the charity and shifting away from that. So I've got two things that sparked for me. One was in the Parasport project, we brought together people from disabled persons organizations, from media, commercial media, and public media, the people from the National Paralympic Committee, who else? People from the university, and they were then driving how they could use that opportunity, like what was their plan for making use of the Paralympics, but also their national games and that kind of thing. And one of the things that has been really important is when they've been able to make partnerships with companies for sponsorship. And that was so important because it shifted the charity. They felt like we're not a charity anymore, we're a partner, and we wear t-shirts with a brand on that they paid for because we've got value. And we're no longer like asking for money and for a good cause, so the association for them was huge in making that transition, and I see it also with some of the youth projects that the NGOs are working with. It's not necessarily paying, but some kind of contribution or buy-in makes all the difference in the disrupting projects from being savior driven to being owned and taken and reshaped and having a buy-in. So I think, that point about just needing to get away from and at every opportunity thinking about does it look like charity and why is really important.
Janet.
Yeah, I think I equally align myself to him because I want to give you an example that, mining is very capital intensive, but in the past, women believe in handouts. And that handouts take away your dignity completely, you understand? Because when you get things completely free. So we told them that, see, if we want to mining is capital intensive and you must be seen to be serious. So when I started what you call the Gold and Gem Conference in Nigeria, GGCE, if you go on Instagram, hashtag GGCE 2024, you see the latest one. You find out that they pay to bring in their products to occupy space in the conference. And initially when they said, no, people will not come, people now come. This is the third year now and it's running and they're excited because they are excited that, so we can be part of a system. So I believe that this synergy is very important when we are trying to bring in a concept to people. Let them have that sense of ownership, that sense of belonging, that sense of where they can see themselves as feeling, you understand, as having contributed something. But when you go on the path of tokenism all along, all true and true, most times it does not last. Most times they don't take ownership. And then you lose the very essence of what you are trying to get at. And then the very thing we are trying to fight, the inclusion, we keep on sending a negative message or vibes to the men to say, they are not strong enough to be in this space. After all, they are being given money. But when people saw the turnout of the conference and saw how successful, this is the 3rd year running, we earned our respect in the space. You understand? And men now knew that, oh, women are ready, women are serious to be in the mining sector. So whatever you will do, I think there should be a mix, you understand, of ensuring that no matter how small, let something come out, you understand, from the people you are taking services to. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Sam, please, you've had a comment.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. I want to engage Janet on this one. Currently in my country, Ghana, there is what I perceive as maybe a brewing problem, and Nana, maybe you can also touch on. And this is the issue of what we term the galamsey, or illegal mining. Okay, so they call it illegal mining, but really, is it illegal mining? Okay, so these are young people mostly, also include women, who are mining on the fringes of these huge companies who have been given the mining certification and all that. Okay, and for many, many years they've been mining. And when you go to some of these communities, it's appalling because it's as if they will repatriate all their profits outside the country, and it is not reflecting on the people there, especially the youth. So they have also taken to mining at the fringes and making good profits out of it, to the extent that now it has become a problem because most of the water bodies are being treated with these poisonous substances they are using for mining. And this, as a country, government wants to clamp down on it and all that. So the youth have openly come out to say that if you dare us, if you dare us on this, it's going to be chaotic. I want to know your views on it, whether this is also happening in Nigeria, and then maybe Nana, if you can also, because I'm sure you are also very familiar with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. And let me commend you on your presentation on the health impact of on climate resiliency and all that yesterday. You see, the subject you touched on is a very sensitive subject in the mining sector. Yeah, illegal mining, like you called it, has been in this space for as long as you can think of, because most people are drawn to that space as a result of two things. It's either the push and pull factors. You want to go and take advantage of whatever is very close by because you don't have any other thing. That's what you have. And so you go there and you pick. So that push and pull factors, two people with little or no tool, they dig, they find something and they take. Then another reason is that some very rich people or influential people are somewhere seated and they take advantage of the poor people, give them money and say, please go and do so. So you find out that behind those people you find who are digging, exerting their energy to get those things out, they have some guys, you understand, who are their agents funding them. However, the word illegal, as much as possible, have been removed because people saw the impact, the contribution of this same set of people, you understand, in the mining space. And who are they? Most times they are the pathfinders. They are the ones who discover, like you call it a kind of reconnaissance survey, who find out that these materials are there before the big companies, before the major companies goes in to get it. So they change the terminology and say, stop calling them illegal miners. Give them the word ASM mining, that is artisanal small-scale mining. But artisanal small-scale mining, again, now have its own controversies because they are on different skills. Somebody with just a jigger and somebody is just a payloader. Both of them are still artisanal as well. So one is destructive and one can be can make contributions. So I believe that government itself, debates have been around this all over. If you look at the African Mining Development Center, the African Union, because I'm in the committee, we've looked at all these things from different angles. And the thing is that, in conclusion, our recommendation is that, see, You cannot take livelihood away from people that easily. They will resist it, they will fight it. More so when you are not providing alternatives. What alternatives are you giving? What policies? So you have to look at the policies. The policies, does it take care of these people? Is there a trickle down, you understand, of the revenue? And our mineral resources governance, you understand, in our different countries in Africa is faulty. That's the truth. When you exclude these people from which you took the materials, you understand, from their backyard, from their soils, and you take it away, and then all you leave behind is sorrow and poverty in the tailings. So for me, I think that it is very essential that policies are such that can accommodate these people. And how do you do it? Somebody who is using jigger and somebody who is using tractors, using mechanized equipment, what quantum of resources can they get? So if you form a synergy, you understand, where these people, you know, can work with the main companies and you just leave them. After all, even in the Bible, it says, leave the things at the fringes. Let people work at the fringes, understand, so that you still have your main farm to do whatever. Form them into cooperatives, formalization. Make sure you have documentation around these people. You will see the transition. In Nigeria too, the destruction is there. The destruction is there because they're not guided, because their capacity is not built. So what Nigeria has decided to do is, I see, come and register, form yourself into cooperatives. Let's formalize you. When we formalize you, you understand, we can provide capacity building extension services, you know, so that you are well educated, you are well informed. Because even in the process of doing all these things, at times they kill themselves. I'm sure you read about the Zamfara lead poisoning. You understand? Because of their little knowledge of all these things. So when you are able to do that, you will find out that everybody is aware of the galamsey problem in Ghana. You understand? It's all over. They give it different names, different local names. So it's all over the place. But the thing is that you cannot, because even when you try to restrict them, you find out that you will still find resistance, whether in the night, whether, so it's better you face the problem and address it positively. And the positive manner to do it is organize them into cooperatives, build their capacity, allocate resources to them, and then even in the process of engaging bigger companies, bring them to the table. You understand, the various communities, let them be part of the consent given, you understand, so that they can negotiate. And then smart mining communities must equally find a way of entering a kind of relationship. You understand? Some have set up trust funds. You understand? It's not only, you know, we mix CSR with some of these things. CSR is a completely different subject, where you give them even ownership, maybe 5%, 2%, 1%, 0.5% of whatever you have. I tell you, that collaboration will bring good results. So in terms of pollution, if you go to River Ocean in Nigeria, what you are saying in Ghana is happening in Nigeria, is happening in Tanzania, is happening all over the place. It's happening in Kenya, everywhere. But holistically, to address them is to realize that they are in the space, bring them in, you understand? You understand? Now I go back to 48 laws of power. Bring them, you understand, to your space, be able, you understand, to train them to do what is right. And then once the livelihood is good, who wants to carry a jigger and go and start sweating it out? Because when you go to the environment and you see when even them, when they're walking, you pity them, you ask them, the energy you exerted and what you are getting from it, are they really equated? You understand? So I believe that that's the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we will come back to kind of politics, power, policy in a second, and I will take question. Let me just kind of turn it around a little bit, and then I remember that there is a question there. Let me just pick up on culture a little bit, because I think we're kind of going around it, but not quite digging into it. Cheryl, you said in your keynote that culture is static when it's convenient, and it moves when it's convenient. And I think this is a really great phrase. And I think it really manifests strongly when we talk about kind of equity and inclusion and justice, in a sense where we're trying to kind of balance innovation and tradition, right? That's where it really comes to play. So, to panelists, how do you actually see, do you think it's possible to make that balancing of innovation and technology inclusive and just and equitable? And where does culture sits in all of this? Cheryl, can I start with you?
Okay. So I haven't heard many arguments or positions in relation to technology and culture. I've just not heard much about we won't use AI, or we won't use a cell phone, or we won't use whatever, because it's not part of culture. I'm not sure, but for me, that hasn't been a dominant discourse. I suppose there are maybe few religious groupings that I've heard would say, no, we can't use this because it's not part of my religion. And sometimes it's I see, I mean, I work also in space of public health in terms of medicine, and it would be, that's where I've heard that discourse. And then, but for me, it hasn't been a dominant discourse. But I've heard the issue of cultural arguments very often in relation to gender justice. And for me, culture, or so-called culture, whatever we deem to be culture, because culture is also not a neutral term, people. Let's be clear about that. In South Africa, there was that little S, cultures, and then it was used to divide and rule, language, race, whatever. So let's not put culture on a pedestal and, you know, and make like it is something that is not, that can't be touched. Culture is not static. But for me, if so-called culture, and I'm using so-called very loosely and playing devil's advocate of here, if culture is against people's human rights, then for me, that's not culture. Then we need to start engaging. And also culture, there's issues of power. I mean, and who enforces what is culture? And let's also recognize, if we look at the Foucauldian notion of power, let's talk about, we all have power, but it's spread differently. It's not like we don't have power. And I mean, I personally, I respect certain things that don't hurt me in terms of culture. So I don't practice any religion. I come from a Muslim background, and my mom was Christian, but the most of the family is Muslim. So I will put a scarf on my head if it's Eid. You know, so there are certain things that I respect. I don't believe that a woman wearing a scarf is anything oppressive. I've got a choice to wear that or not. So for me, I think there is no one size fits all, and one needs to always acknowledge the issue of power and also, of course, the issue of human rights. Culture cannot, abuse of cultural practices or so-called cultural practices cannot trump a human rights practice. We also need to sometimes understand, in Africa, where did these cultural practices emerge? Like, for example, there's a very old article looking at women's fertility. And so termination of pregnancy is like, oh no, you're killing the baby. Termination of pregnancy in African cultures has always been there historically, generationally, and women control their fertility by using herbs. But also, the human rights discourse is, I mean, it's women's bodies and they have a choice. And what can the state legislate and what should the state not legislate? But for me, the overall point is that culture and human rights, if it's cultural, it has to be within a human rights framework.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I was also struck by some of those ideas you had around culture change being convenient and not, and also when you were talking about LGBTQ cultures being part of African culture as well, it reminded me of a paper by an author called Boateng, who talks about it's a decolonial lens to talk about damages and erosion that have taken place through colonialism and development. And maybe it's innovative to be recovering and repairing some of the care-based structures that were pre-existing, and repairing some of the damages that have been done for, recovering some of those cultures that were there and rethinking where some of the discourses come from.
Yeah, so one of the things I always think about like a solution aspect to things, because the problem can be quite large in terms of trying to like understand how we fix everything. It's like, well, what's the basis of like, I think about how do you want to feel? So culture needs to be essentially what everyone is kind of shared, is the human rights, but it's also respect. So we build a culture in our organization and everything we do, that every child that comes in is greeted and looked at instead of looked to. But they're only going to learn that as a culture because of what's been shown to them, changed to them. And I think too often, and this is not just on, we might think of Africa as a culture and how the cultures and its systems and so on. And I might think about my parents, and other people think about their parents and the strictness of what they know and so on. But I think you also have power in be the person you needed, essentially. And then that will be the new form of culture in your environment. And so I think, and that's why I always go back to the very first statement of like not fully penalizing the knowledge point of cultures that existed. But if you don't agree with it and so on, you have a chance to rebuild and show, and then everyone would because it's a transition. You cannot once again just go, this is gonna happen, and also, and it's strange because I'm talking like this, my parents and my people younger will be like, I was a rebel, I didn't agree with any culture, none of it's happening. I would live on the streets if I have to, because I don't agree with this. But in getting a bit older, but also knowing that to get things to move forward a little bit more, and it's to exchange knowledge. So respecting that every person you meet has got something to teach you. But if, like I said, if I'm in a space where I go to my Muslim groups and they behave, I have to know that I've chosen to go to this place. I'm going to respect their culture. I'm going to understand it before I try and give my opinion on whatsoever. Or if I don't agree with it, don't show up. It's honestly, I think, because that's where people nothing moves forward, because we think about culture, we think about it changing, we think about young people, we think about technology, anything that's coming in new. We almost throw stones before we actually realize what's the benefits of it, and then how do you create dialogue, because you're not going to take away systematic powers. I think about it in terms of even in the UK, there are systematic inequalities that existed for so long. Everyone is rioted at, but what's changed? We have to kind of build and then allow those in power to go, hey, you're kind of being left behind. Like your culture that exists is now shrinking. You still have power, but it's just shrinking to a small group because the world is evolving. Africa has, when you were talking to your point as well, Professor, I think it's so important that we recognize that Africa, and you guys are all scholars, so you would know in terms of having the youngest population like globally. And Kenya, half its population is under 19. So when those in power start to steep down on culture, the children will burn a village to feel its warmth. So, and there's more of them. So that's something I'm going to leave back there.
Thank you. Janet, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you so much. The twin between culture and technology is quite interesting to me. And I remember that when my nephew migrated to Canada, the school teacher said something which stuck, and it said, please don't let them lose their language. Culture is very, very important. And development, irrespective of what, must not take our culture away from us. It must not erase it. Rather, it can enhance it, and technology can equally help to enhance it. If you see, recently a book was launched in Canada and celebrated called Kikelomo. That lady simply wrote a small book talking about names, the meaning, the deep connectivity between name, you understand, and a person. And the book is now placed in all schools in Canada. That's very important. Prof says something. Any culture that abuses or erodes or touch on human rights, on fundamental human rights, is not a culture. You understand? That can be resisted. But anything that touches on development, that will wipe away heritage sites and things like that, should not be tampered with, because we all have roots. And that is why when I went to British Columbia University, the thing is that when you want to make your presentation, you acknowledge the land. You acknowledge the owners of the land. And in Australia, when we went to Australia for a project, when we got to the site, I saw the consultant took the soil and was speaking to the soil. And I was saying, oh, so they do this too here, because they respected the spirits behind the soil. You allow people do their thing, because as long as it does not hurt you. When you are thinking of profitability or looking at things, the culture equally matters. So both of them are on the same scale, and it should be taught. It should be passed on your hands down. When people are discussing in the boardroom, discussing business, you understand, companies are eager, as big companies to talk politics. You must bring in these people to hear the cultural perspective of what you want to do. So when the two are intertwined, you find out that the project becomes very successful. But when you resist culture and you throw it away, and I tell you that most of the problems we even have today is because people lost their identity. They no longer know who they are. In Yoruba culture, for instance, you have what you call Omoluabi. And Omoluabi simply means how do I translate it? Because even we are losing the language gradually. Omoluabi simply means somebody who is well brought up, somebody who has respect, that is a total package. Somebody who you can call responsibility in total. So you will not find somebody who is conscious of that identity of an Omoluabi, go and falsify documents, go and steal. You won't find that person doing anything, because he is mindful. He or she is mindful of who she is, where she comes from. So you won't want to mess up around. You won't want to travel abroad. You want to be an ambassador of your family. That's what it means. So for me, you find out that because this culture is gradually being eroded, people are misguided, people lose their identity, they don't know who they are. Development should not take that. Rather, technology can enhance it. Technology can promote it. We can use technology, to document some of these things and pass them from generation to generation. Then the cultural sites we visit in England, when people come and say, oh, let's go and look at Buckingham Palace, let's go and look at it, it's because it's preserved. It's because those things are preserved. Likewise, in some other countries, they have their own sites that people can visit. So we should not say, oh, because we are bringing in development, oh, we need to pull down some things. So heritage-driven policies are very important during project formation. When you are thinking of having a project in mining, we always tell them, heritage-driven policies must be a component. You understand? You want to take an inventory of where their sites, what do they do, engage the local chiefs, hear them out, know what their do's are, what their don'ts are, and then midway, find a position to be able to function effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's open for questions. There's a question here.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask a different question, but it looks like the culture one is very exciting. So I'll shift to the culture one.
You can ask both.
Yeah. So my question is going to go to Professor Cheryl. Seeing as she's from South Africa, and I know in South Africa there is talk about Ubuntu, a lot of Ubuntu, and the whole region, Southern Africa, the concept of Ubuntu is big. So my question to you is, how do you see this concept assisting us in understanding inclusivity? You spoke about LGBTIQ, and also you spoke about women, the challenges that women are facing. Do you see this concept of Ubuntu being one that could be elevated to really help with these questions?
So Ubuntu is we all will be all through each other. And if we, it's we cannot achieve who we are or what we want to be. It's through It has to be through communities and joint engagement. I think it's a concept which has been explored in terms of inclusivity. I think very often Ubuntu has been written about and engaged with in academic papers. But let's also be honest, our economy is sort of, it's a modern form of a capitalist economy, and that comes with all its negativities, or of course its pluses. But I think Ubuntu as a concept could be used in terms of inclusivity. But I also think a basic human rights framework, which includes Ubuntu, is one that could be used or underpinned a framework of inclusivity. And I think in terms of the LGBTQI plus challenges across Africa, one needs to have arguments which are based fundamentally on human rights. And I think we need to stop tiptoeing around the problem. That's culture. There was no homosexuality in Africa. No. We need to start saying that this is against international law. This is against basic human rights. And bring people along. But the problem at the moment is that people, I believe that the majority of people on the ground are would be more accommodating to same-sex engagement. And it's not only about sex, let's be clear about that. If the governments did not have these draconian laws which have been passed in the last 3, 4, 12 months. There's always been homophobia and issues of stigma against particular groupings. But the fact that it's now criminalized, legislated. Racism has been all over the world. We still experience racism. We have racism all over the world. But it's not legislated as it was under apartheid. So we need to start at the policy level. And yes, if we could use a concept like Ubuntu, I believe human rights concepts, feminist concepts, African ways of knowledge and doing should all be incorporated into the issue of keeping the big men of Africa. And it's not only the big men, I'm using that word men loosely in terms of the challenges that we have in terms of inclusivity. Look also in the African context, and not only in the African context, but also there's been challenges that if you are born as, and I'm now forgetting the word, but you're black, but you're born like very light-skinned, albinism, that it is bad luck and it's witchcraft. So that has also had to be engaged with. I know in the northern areas of South Africa as well. So inclusivity, it's, we're talking about inclusivity of all. And one needs to also always understand where is this discrimination starting? It's the schools, it's religious spaces, and also, of course, the homes, where it's convenient to others.
Yes, I'll build on what Professor Cheryl mentioned about how our cultures are actually dynamic rather than static. But what Janet mentioned about the essence of documenting these shifts or the changes that you see. And my question is, how do you see communities of governments
systematically start to document or preserve this intangible cultural heritage across Africa, especially cognizant of the rapid changes that are happening. We know that we have these intangible value, many of these cultures, values and practices. So how do we actually systematically document this whether the community or through systems across governments? Anyway.
Oh, presumably, yeah.
I would always say, for me, is I'm gonna like harp on it. You have to involve the youth into this because they're gonna pass it on. So by creating more like artistic and creative minds that would want to document these things, like pushing more subjects around history and heritage, like within, like from an early age to young people, because I think that way they could sit with the elderly, the people that have gone before to understand and document these things. But also this aspect of like technology that's coming now that also supports that. Like I think I was reading, one of the young people showed me something around like the Great Wall of China, and then there was something similar in Africa that was even bigger and longer. And I was like, what? And they were showing me by AI and the way it would have existed and so on. So all of that, there is no way. I think I know everything. I don't. I had to be shown by a 14-year-old from what if, and I think that's the thing of, and be based on his interest on that. So I think for me, it's about making sure you build a workforce and like that can do that. I think I always talk on the sporting analogies, like there's a problem somewhere with a position, then train people to do that, but also then train the next generation just to say there's never any problem in that position again. And I think that's what I would probably do from there.
Yeah, could I just make a point? Of course. So my background is in nutrition, but I was at a community engagement event a couple of months ago in Bournemouth, and someone raised a point about what you just said. People were like, we have our cultural habits, behaviors, we have traditional diets that are doing the stuff we are talking about these days about probiotics and prebiotics, you know. And so because of that, that comment informed a proposal that I wrote. I've just been awarded a fellowship, it's a Wellcome Trust Fellowship, and I'm going to look at positive deviance. So as part of that, I'm trying to explore what are the positive things, what are those cultural habits that will lead to, you know, positive health behaviors, you know. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that the onus lies on us as young researchers coming, you know, whatever the discipline is, we can, from African origin, document this. We can do research with the communities, you know, and document these positive cultural, you know, behaviors.
And I add and share, and sharing, because I think that's the thing, is like, there's so much knowledge. Sorry to interject. I was just saying, like, that's such a valid point, because the intentionality to share it as well becomes that becomes the power of that thing. So yeah, no, I'm excited.
Wow, amazing keynote speech and great panel discussion so far. So I always like to bring in the realistic, you know, point of view from those who have listened from us as Monday. I like to go to the core and just bring us all back to, when you look at issues happening, I always like to go to the source. Maybe it's engineering in me, I don't know. You just go to the source to fix the foundation, and then that way the building can stand. So speaking about cultures first, in terms of appreciating people's culture. So I'm traveled a lot to different cultures, and Asian, you know, America, African, and now the UK European culture, which is what I'm experiencing now. And the first thing I always do is to first learn, just appreciate. Like, you're not there to bring your own views and force it down people's throats. You just want to understand how is your way of life, and then you pick the positives from it, and the ones that don't align with your own culture, your way of life, then you can leave that. But you don't have to come and insult people or make them feel challenged. And right now in Asia, specifically in Japan, in some parts of South Korea, this is bringing a big issue. So what happened is there's some Black origin influencers who have been going to these countries to make films, and they've been very insulting to these people's cultures. And so now some youth from this Asian background who may not understand necessarily how to, face this issue, and they have now they've resorted to racism. So you have pictures of gorillas now being put out. You have people having the N-word, vicious slur, as a response to that initial disrespect. So this is happening all over Twitter. So if you follow Twitter, you see what's going on. I mean, both sides are wrong, but what caused it initially? Somebody incited them. You didn't come there to respect their cultures, and they understand that it's not every Black person that does that. But I mean, again, the same way you're not having response from every Asian person doing the same thing, right? Coming now back to Africa, where you have the patriarchal system. So for years, you have people feel that men are the ones who should go to work, who should go to school. We have then, due to poverty, some families will say, you know what, let's send the men, women, you stay back, after all, you're gonna get married. So let the men go because they'll carry on the family name. So over time, what happened was you had that disparity. So the men became educated, they became empowered, they were getting the jobs, and the women were just left, according to our former president, President Buhari. He actually openly in an interview said, women don't belong in where real talks are happening, we belong in the other room being where the husband and wife would sleep or the partners would sleep. So, and this is in an international stage interview, that's what our president was saying. So, and he represented a lot of ideologies that you have. And that also trickles down in a way to the youth of today, whereby men feel that women shouldn't go to school, or they feel when women are empowered, they become disrespectful. And then guess what the shocker is? When they started migrating, a lot of them are migrating now due to harsh economic conditions. You have many marriages breaking up because now for example, you're in the UK, your wife has to go to work, you have to go to work, and she can't come back home and do everything. And then she starts protesting more because why? The laws here protect her rights. And what happens? They break up. And then they go to Twitter or they go back home and, oh, women are coming here and they're being disrespectful. No, you have been abusing her rights, before now. And then you link that again to some cultures, whereby in the Eastern region, Igbo culture, where I'm from Igbo, even though the parents have lots of properties, the women were seen as not prone to inherit properties. So one of the main child would inherit properties. Sorry?
And so that has been legislated against. The court has ruled on that.
And yes, it has been legislated against that. And lastly, in terms of just to link back to gender issues and LGBTQ, there is a big problem of jungle justice, especially amongst the non-educated happening. So what happens is when somebody sees something or people see something that is against their norms, then instead of them waiting for the law to take its place, they just come together and beat that person, and sometimes these persons end up dying. So, and those who are in the LGBTQ space, sometimes they face this in Nigeria and other African countries. So these are issues that I think, policies and, when we're having that bigger discussion, we have to just chip those parts in as well.
Thank you. Any quick responses before we move on to the next part? Next question. Yeah, okay, I think it's it links us nicely to actually the power and politics and policy, all of which are very different but important. Again, Cheryl, you said in your keynote that the personal is political, is professional. And I think we quite often shy away from that, right? And kind of separating personal and political and professional, or at least pretending that these are not connected. And so my question to you is the following. How do we ensure that and this is kind of the banner, I guess, of the vibrant and inclusive communities. How do we ensure that the state, the government, the private sector, the communities are all collaborate to actually achieve that justice and equity and inclusion and make sure that it's long lasting?
I think there needs to be engagement and formal engagement with stakeholders, government, the private sector, NGOs, and of course, civil society, the NGOs are part of, and the corporates. And there needs to be ongoing conversations, but there also needs to be, there would be, for example, a mining in Durban or an engineering in Durban or a conference or in Durban on higher education. And government would be, the private sector would be there and civil society would be there. And there would often be, there would be a signing of a memorandum of agreement. So civil society needs to ensure that those agreements are implemented and accounted for. But I still do believe that we have to start at the policy framework. And yes, we in South Africa and in many other countries, we're good at policy, but we're not necessarily good at implementing and monitoring and evaluating the successes. But we need to use the various instruments that we have at that we have and the various international agreements that our countries have been part of, that they've signed to, that they committed to. We need to ensure that those are implemented at the local level and of course at the national. And let me just say at the national level, because South Africa is not I can't talk for the whole of Africa, but I think the principle that I'm arguing for and needs to be for me is important, but also at an individual level. I mean, we are NGOs, we people that work in higher education. I also think our research, how do we get to understand what research needs to be done? So I think that, for example, there needs to be research at the moment in terms of the impact of climate change on the LGBTQI+ community. I've looked out in the literature what has been done. There's just been a rapid literature review on what has been done, and they found 14 articles, none of which was in Africa or South Africa. So we need to look at the gaps in our research and do research which is going to make an impact, because like the people that were sitting on the panel yesterday, and I really support that kind of thinking, that it needs to be evidence-based. So that's important. But we also need to know that funders, funders make calls for particular research. So there's not a lot of research funding that's going to look at LGBTQI+ funding. It's just not going to happen. I look at, for example, I did an article a couple of years ago where I looked at what the curriculum in South Africa was saying or not saying about the LGBTQI community, and also analyzing the certain curriculum. That got a lot of hits and it was really great. But when I'm looking at Black lesbians identity, it's not going anywhere. It's not getting a lot of reads on ResearchGate. Or anyway, so one needs to know that there's also stigma in terms of what you are doing. Now, I know years ago, don't do a PhD on Black lesbians. You are a good psychologist, a good academic. Why do you want to now support? Why do you want to damage your career? And that thinking is still there. You're not going to just get funding. So coming back to your question, the personal is political, is professional. It impacts on us all the time. So I can do research. I mean, I'm trained as a quantitative researcher. I can do big research, statistics, but I choose at particular times to do a qualitative study looking at the experiences of women in higher education. It's not going to get me lots of funding, but the personal is political, is professional. So you also need to balance. And as a woman, I've been quite senior in higher education. the office, the corner office it's cold, it's not easy. And I'm not convinced at this stage that you, in my environment, that you can be a feminist leader in a vice chancellor or a deputy vice chancellor position. I have been a deputy vice chancellor. But these trade-offs, and somebody must do it, but does it have to be me or Ksenia or Jessica? You know, so in our careers, the triple P, the personal, professional is political. We also need to be strategic, and we need to assist younger academics and emerging academics about these strategies. You don't need to go and fight about the coffee, but make sure you sit on the recruitment committee, that you're going to get a person that represents change and transformation in a space that you maybe have a little bit of power to make a decision.
Thank you, Cheryl. Janet, do you have any comments?
Yes, I think it's very, very important, you know, to view collaboration is a key. There must be intentional collaboration between all stakeholders, that is government, civil society, government as the policymakers, civil society organizations, and the community itself, that is the people. And each has specific role to play, because you find out that there should be clear metrics, you understand, multi-dimensional metrics, you know, to measure and evaluate all the things we have said today. You want the civil society comes in and ensure transparency in policies and accountability. Government itself has the capacity, you know, to dish out laws, to come up with policies and regulations. Then the stakeholders must be engaged to precisely know what they want. And maybe companies within, you know, because when you talk of stakeholders, now you have companies. I'm talking from the mining perspective every time I'm making a point anyway. So the mining company, for instance, if you are going into a community, there must be benchmark. What was the situation? You know, you do a baseline studies. What is the situation when you got there? What's the community like? What is the demography? You understand? What movements have you been able to do? What is the percentage of your revenue that you have committed to development and things like that? There must be debates around this, and it must be open and transparent. Only then can you talk of inclusivity. But if a company comes to a mining environment, Rio Tinto, for instance, it's not allowed to be circulated. But if you go on YouTube, look for a particular document stealing from Africa, and you see what happened in Zimbabwe, you will all be shedding tears. This guy made so much money. You understand? Because I don't, to avoid sanctions, that he took this money, you know, to his own home country. You understand? And his own mayor was so upset and had to call the community to say, what do we do with this money? Do we now do a quick tax law to be able to support the community where this guy got the money from, that is taking copper from that community? But the people said no. They were living in wanton poverty, but he cutted things away. So those things must be stopped. And how do you stop them? You stop them through this collaboration, where people are actually open or talking about issues. You bring things to the table where the civil society are so much empowered, you understand, to be able to talk. They are not quiet. And then you have a government that is open. You know, natural resources governance is the most difficult things because of the corruption around it. You understand? It's never transparent. You don't know what is happening. The World Bank, the international organizations have a role to play. I'm on the CSPF board in World Bank, representing West and Central Africa. And I remembered last year, somebody asked a question and said, how do you calculate the debt of African countries? Even the president does not know how the debts are calculated. Somebody just tell you this is what you are owing, and you keep on paying, and they say you've not paying it. You can never finish paying the debt, and they keep on. You understand? So all these things, when they are open, when they are transparent, then that is when you can talk of inclusivity. But you cannot be coming up and dishing and saying you are giving grants with one hand. You understand? And infusing poverty into that same community. It's all hypocrisy of the system. So if things must be done, Let us sit down and be honest. Let us be at the table, you understand? And make sure that even the global north and the global south must practice what we preach. That is inclusion, inclusivity, you understand? Not exclude one another from development. We talked about that, and now we just quickly round it up by going back to what we discussed there, what you discussed yesterday, and that's the issue of climate change. Climate change, who are the major polluters? Africans don't have anything to pollute the system with. You understand? I remember I was in Paris. Do they have anything to, what technology do we have? Nothing. But when it came to liability, Africans have oil. They've invested so much in coming up with the oil and everything. We now say fossil fuel, no, by so year, we must make sure, is it just, is it fair? The kind of transition we are talking about. How do they recoup their funds from the investment? And we now said, okay, the greatest polluters, do a kind of transfer some funds, you understand? That is remediate funds back to the countries, you understand? To be able to help them to bridge the gap. Was it done? No, we come with grants. We are beyond grants. Let us be sincere and come to the table. When we come to the table and we talk real, you understand? That honesty will bring the inclusion we are driving. That honesty will bring development we are driving. And everybody at the end of the day is happy. You understand? Thank you. That's my contribution.
Yeah, thank you, Janet.
Yeah, so I think that collaboration amongst all these stakeholders and sometimes I feel quite alarmed at the level of collaboration that already is with the private sector and the corporate sector in some of these areas. So another PPP is public-private partnerships, which is included in the SDGs. Goal 17 is partnerships with the goals. SDGs, when we talk about those, we often hear that it's going to take trillions, not billions, to be able to reach, which is the justification for including private sector and corporates in achieving the SDGs. And whose interest is this serving? It's pretty much serving the corporates' interests. They're putting a lot of the risk, there's de-risking of their investments going on. A lot of the risk goes onto governments, onto the communities, onto societies. So yeah, I think that there is a lot of place of there's already a lot of collaboration happening, or at least there's a lot of presence and power of corporates in some of these spaces that I think we just need to pay attention to. And another reason to be strengthening civil society everywhere, to be calling that out and keeping an eye on what it means, and privatization for services on the ground. There's a great book that looks at this from a gender feminist perspective. What happens when you have public-private partnerships going into health, into education, into probably transport. So I think just to keep an eye on that we don't get carried away with collaboration being always really good.
Thanks, sir. No.
Do you want to comment?
I just wanted to
please.
make one point. I hope at some stage that we can talk about illicit tax outflows from the African continent. Gender and tax is a huge issue. The multinationals come into Africa and there's tax incentives. If you're one of these multinationals, whether it's an Amazon or I don't know what other example I could give, you come in, you sell your whatever you're selling online, but you're not paying tax in Africa. So the illicit or the tax outflows as a result of illicit tax outflows, but also because there's not policy to manage these tax outflows. It's getting better because we have an organization in Africa now called ATAF, African Tax Association, and they're doing like really, really good work. But I think us as gender activists or human rights activists, we very often forget to engage the issues of the financials, because illicit tax outflows is impacting on poor people. And of course, poverty, like I said, is feminized. So illicit tax outflows is affecting the woman that's selling her produce at the market.
Yeah, I always juggle with this around like when when I started, I thought about like the powerlessness that you feel, and who across like communities, education, politics and policies, who has the biggest influence. Well, the governments and corporate companies don't really think anyone on the 80% has any value to bring. So they only speak to institutions. Community only also trust education as a force of thriving, so they only speak to education. But therefore, the institution that actually governs this is education, it's universities. You could shape and change what governments and corporates do on their bottom line, but you also have the ear and the trust of the community. I'm saying this from a place of like love as well, because I'm now Dr. Nana Badu, so I'm part of the but I'm saying I'm almost saying that, and I always like to break things down in a very simplified way when we speak, because we can talk on issues and we haven't spoken to anyone about anything. We've just spoke from a place of our own knowledge, and we haven't learned to communicate it in a way that means that the 80% that have the answers, who are closest to the problem, who have the solutions to that as well. We've explained our knowledge point and research in a way that only speaks to money and power. And so I feel like we are, and that's where like one of the key things about utilizing my privilege now in this space is to make sure that like as the person who has found himself in this space, making sure at all times when we're understanding which stakeholder and what they need and want, the community, and when we talk about community in itself, and it can be named into different aspects, whether it be gender or whatever, there's still different communities. Because of a survival mindset, we come with what we want. Sorry, what we need at the moment. Or no, sorry, what we want at the moment. And so therefore, what the job of having this privilege is also, are you building for what they're gonna need? And how are you making that argument when you're speaking to powers and change makers? Because you are that, you are an influencer. So I do believe that institutions, and I was talking about like there's so much research, there's so many like clever research that's had so much information. How is it being fed to policymakers, change makers that actually impacts? Because the research is always done to the community. The information is like, and it's like it's somehow it's changed that the information comes and they don't feel the warmth of that. So I think that's where I don't know if we need to have more young people from the community going into research, more academics that are coming in to understand that. Do they understand that? On my graduation speech, I explained to the students that you hold so much power. Like you can't say we want to see. No, you have it. You're from these institutions. You're gonna go and change the world. Make sure you use your power wisely. So I do believe that we keep forgetting about the institutions that have the power to influence both aspects. You're trusted by the community because we respect, particularly Africa, we respect education above all. I think, I don't know if it's before God or after God, but one of them. And so that shows that what we have. I remember my grandma calling me when I got my doctorate, and it was the biggest thing. Forget other things that I've done. This thing happened. And I think just for us when we speak to policy and government. So I just think that's something maybe for us all to reflect on in our place of privilege and power, with research and knowledge and being part of an institution, particularly ones such as this and many others that have such influence on governments, on country, on policies. What conversation are we having? And was it based on supporting what the community we spoke to needed and wanted, but also working on what they need after? So when they win, that's where I kind of work in my opinion.
Thank you. Wow, what a panel. Thank you.